You don't crave perfection, you crave safety. Control became your way of keeping chaos from returning. Every list, every routine, every contingency plan. It wasn't about achievement, it was about survival. You learned early on that if you could just predict the next storm, maybe you wouldn't drown in it again. Maybe if you stayed alert enough, responsible enough, perfect enough, the world would stay still for a moment. But control was never peace. It was just a quiet kind of panic dressed as order. When you were young, unpredictability wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. The moods in your home changed without warning. Love came with conditions. Affection was rationed by performance. You watched the adults around you lose their grip on stability, and you promised yourself you never let that happen again. You became the caretaker, the overthinker, the one who cleaned up emotional messes before they spilled. You read faces the way others read books, scanning for shifts, decoding tones, adjusting your own behavior before conflict could ignite. That was how you learned to stay safe. Control wasn't something you chose, it was something you inherited from chaos. It was the way your nervous system adapted to uncertainty. You internalized the belief that if you could manage everything, the outcome, the timing, the reactions, maybe you could finally rest. But rest never came, did it? Because the more you controlled, the more you feared losing it. The tighter you held on, the more fragile everything felt. Like gripping sand in your hands, the harder you squeeze, the faster it slips through your fingers. You became the planner, the fixer, the one who couldn't relax until every detail was accounted for. You called it responsibility, but deep down it was fear. Hypervigilance masquerading as maturity. You learned to micromanage your environment because no one managed it for you when it mattered most. Somewhere along the way, control became your religion, predictability your prayer. And every time life surprised you, you mistook it for punishment instead of reality. There's a quiet exhaustion that comes from living like this. The kind that sits in your chest even when everything looks fine. Because control demands vigilance. It keeps you awake at night, replaying conversations, rewriting outcomes, over-analyzing silences. It makes you believe that peace is something you earn through effort, not something that comes from surrender. And yet, when you finally get what you thought you needed, the structure, the order, the success, it never feels like enough. Because control doesn't soothe the wound, it just hides it behind precision. You see, control is often the adult costume of a scared child. The inner child who learned that safety depended on their ability to manage the emotions of others. The one who became parentified, who stepped into roles they were never meant to play. That child still lives inside you, scanning for danger, tightening the grip every time something feels uncertain. The tragedy is that the very thing that once protected you is now what keeps you from living. When we micromanage life, we think we're protecting ourselves. But what we're really doing is denying ourselves. We silence our intuition because it can't be predicted. We suppress spontaneity because it threatens the illusion of safety. We avoid vulnerability because it introduces variables we can't control. But control and connection can't coexist. Love requires uncertainty, growth requires risk, healing requires letting go of the scripts we wrote just to survive. There's a moment in every healing journey when you realize you've built a life that looks safe but feels suffocating. You wake up and realize you can't breathe under all the routines, expectations, and contingency plans. That's when the real work begins, not in perfecting control, but in loosening it. In learning that peace doesn't come from mastery, but from trust. Trust in yourself, trust in life, trust that you can handle what comes even when it's not planned. Shadow work often begins here, at the intersection of fear and surrender. It asks you to sit with the part of you that still believes the world will collapse if you stop managing it. To hold that part gently, without judgment, to whisper to it what it's needed to hear all along. You're safe now. You don't have to hold everything together because control was never about arrogance. It was about fear. The fear of loss, of abandonment, of chaos returning. The fear that without vigilance, everything would fall apart. Healing is not about abandoning structure. It's about reclaiming choice. You can plan without obsessing, prepare without panicking, organize without imprisoning yourself in expectation. The goal isn't to eliminate control, it's to understand its origin, to recognize when it's coming from love and when it's coming from fear. Because when you start choosing instead of reacting, you stop living from trauma and start living from trust. There's a tenderness in surrender, not weakness, but courage. It's the moment you unclench your fists and realize the world didn't end. The emails didn't all need to be answered. The plan didn't need to be perfect. The people you love didn't disappear because you stopped performing for them. You didn't lose yourself. You just stopped holding yourself hostage. Sometimes healing looks like letting the dishes sit in the sink, turning off your phone, saying, "I don't know," without spiraling, letting someone else take care of things for once. Sometimes it looks like being human, messy, uncertain, alive. And maybe that's the scariest part, realizing that life is supposed to be unpredictable, that chaos isn't always danger. Sometimes it's just movement, change, life breathing on its own without your permission. The illusion of control is comforting because it promises certainty in an uncertain world. But control was never meant to be your identity. It was a temporary shelter, a coping mechanism your mind built when safety wasn't guaranteed. And now that you're no longer in danger, you get to step outside that shelter, to feel the wind, to trust the ground, to remember what it's like to exist without anticipating the next storm. Healing doesn't mean you'll stop craving control. It means you'll stop mistaking it for safety. You'll still plan, still care, still want things to go right, but you'll stop collapsing when they don't. You'll stop believing that every mistake is a threat. You'll start realizing that imperfection isn't chaos, it's connection. It's what makes life human, relationships honest, and moments real. So maybe the question isn't, how do I stop needing control? Maybe it's, what am I really afraid will happen if I let go? Because beneath the surface, control isn't about power, it's about protection. And the parts of you still clinging to it, the ones checking, fixing, predicting, they're not broken, they're just scared. Let them know it's safe to rest, that you can handle the uncertainty now, that you've outgrown the world where love had to be earned and peace had to be managed. The world doesn't need to be controlled for you to be safe. You are safe because you've learned how to stay grounded even when life moves. You are safe because you know how to return to yourself when everything feels unpredictable. And maybe, in time, you'll stop trying to control life and start dancing with it. You'll stop mistaking surrender for weakness and see it for what it truly is. Trust in motion, because control may have kept you alive, but surrender is what will let you live.